I love the line where the priest in the movie says, "Marriage is what brings us together today." I just think that's a great line. And marriage is what brings us together today. Because we're doing this series, Two Becoming One. And so far in this series, Two Becoming One, we looked at two becoming one as friends. That's where it should start. It should start with the building of friendship. And then we looked at two becoming one in the bedroom. And we looked at the sex talk last week and what the Bible had to say about sex. If you missed either of those messages, you can go to slbc2u.org, slbc2u.org, and you can either listen to them through audio or you can watch them through video. This morning, I want to talk about two becoming one in our roles. In our roles. Let's pray together. Father in heaven, I do want to ask this morning that we would see your greatness even in marriage. That we would understand, Lord, that men and women are different, and in their differences there is a uniqueness. Uniqueness doesn't mean conforming and being the same. It just means being different. And help us to enjoy that difference, we pray. In Christ's name. Amen. I turned to Facebook this past week and I shared with people on Facebook what I was going to be preaching on and if they had any comments about roles. And I want to read to you one of the responses that I received through an email. And again, this will show us how roles are important. What a topic. And I've changed names here to protect the people, okay? What a topic. Jerry and I have personally struggled with roles through the years. For 7 years, he was really checked out. He was raised by an alcoholic single mom with no intention of teaching him about roles. My dad was very overpowering in his idea of roles. It wasn't good either. We were both confused. Just when we were figuring out a healthy marriage and a peaceful balance, Jerry lost his job and I became the worker while he stayed home. It was miserable for both of us because our roles were messed up. It was awful. He felt terrible about himself, not providing for us financially, and I hated having to go to work instead of caring for our home. Thank God he brought us through that time. It was terrible, but we did learn a lot. We really worked together. I do struggle with being more of the disciplinarian because I was raised that way and he wasn't. Also, it's that curse from the beginning where women are always struggling to be the head over the husbands. It's something I have to work on and pray about every day. I know my tendency to try to be in charge, so I really work on it. You see, roles play an enormous part of marriage. So we better learn how this is played out in this dance that we call marriage. Robert Lewis and William Hendricks in their book Rocking the Roles defines roles as the essential function that God has designed a man or a woman to fulfill in a marriage relationship. It's an essential function that God has designed a man and a woman to fulfill in a marriage relationship. It is more about responsibility than it is about rank. So let's jump in the message today, the two becoming one. I encourage you to pull out your sermon note sheet from your bulletin this morning. Friends get married. Friends get married. They enjoy the intimacy of their wedding night and their honeymoon. And then they return to reality. They wake up to the responsibilities of being married. They wake up and realize that they have responsibilities. They are no longer responsible only for themselves. No, there is now another person in the equation. Do I do everything that I once did when I was single? Or do I share the load with the one that I'm married to now? As we run our household together, who is going to be responsible for what? Now I know that many times roles are discussed before marriage. You'll have people, just before they get married, they'll sit down, they'll talk about, hey, I'll be responsible for this, and you can be responsible for that, and I'll do this, and you can do that. But then they get married, and those rules that they created, the roles that they were going to follow, are not very closely followed. The roles of the husband and the wife within the confines of marriage can and often do lead to division. There are fights. Many times the spouse feels like they're doing everything in the marriage. They view it like this: I'm doing 90% of everything and you're doing 10%. Sometimes that is true in some marriages. Sometimes that is true. Sometimes it's a figment of your imagination, though, as well. My goal this morning is not to divide up the responsibilities of household chores. What I want to do is offer some biblical principles that might assist couples in rightly understanding their respective roles in a marriage relationship. Some biblical perspectives. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the word roles, and I'm going to use it as an acrostic this morning, and I'm going to talk about his roles, and then I'm going to talk about her roles as an acrostic form. These are some biblical principles. I encourage you to write these down this morning. First of all, let's talk to the husbands, the roles of the husbands. These are the roles that you need to accept in your marriage relationship this morning. Number one, relational. Relational. Genesis chapter 2, verse 23. Relationship is everything to a woman. They're all about relationships. Companionship for a woman is essential. God designed your wife, gentlemen, to be your completer. To be your completer. We live for relationships. God created all of us with a need for people. That's why we were born into a family. This is why friendships are important. This is also why having a relationship with God is important. And every man needs a relationship with God. Every man in this auditorium this morning needs a relationship with their Creator. Establish a solid vertical relationship with God. Get this morning. Establish that vertical relationship with your Creator, and it will be much easier for you to have a good horizontal relationship with your wife. In other words, get right with God, be right with your wife. And many times, get this, many times it is out of the frustrations of the conflict of roles in a home where all of a sudden you're not thinking about God, you're thinking about yourself. Conflict is created. So get right with God, and you'll be right with your spouse. And by the way, when you're having conflict in your marriage, guess what? You're not right with God when you're having conflict. Now, man, you romanced your wife to win her heart. You romanced her. You took the initiative to build that relationship at the very beginning. So what are you doing today? What are you doing right now? Are you still being the pursuer? God has called you to be the pursuer. Carla, Jeff, and I went up to Ione this past week on Thursday. On the way back, we were in a conversation. I don't remember exactly how all this came about. But Jeff told me, in the presence of his wife, that he is the one who romances her. That he is the one who keeps the romance alive in their marriage. And Carla said, yep, he does. She agreed with him. She says, I'm so busy all the time. Isn't that what you said? I'm so busy. That Jeff is the one who keeps that romance going. And listen, man, you and I need to be the pursuers. We need to keep the romance going. You know, a lot of guys look at getting a wife like hunting. You know, they go out, they hunt, they bag their animal. I'm done. Now they move on to something else. We've got to somehow get beyond that. Husbands are to be the initiators and the pursuers of the wife. And the wife is to be, get this, the receiver and the responder. Don't get it turned around, husbands. Chase after your wife. Chase after her. Husbands are responsible for relationship building in their marriage. I can't overly state the importance of doing everything you possibly can as a husband to build health into your marriage. Women are designed for relationships. That's why you see them when they travel in packs. I mean, they can't even go to the bathroom by themselves. They take a pack with them into the bathroom. It would be really weird for a man if I said, hey Jason, I gotta go to the bathroom. Will you go with me? I mean, that's a strange concept for men. But women travel in packs, they travel in groups. I mean, they were the first groupies. This is how Christ loves His church. We read these words, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave Himself for her." Gave Himself for her. And far too many wives have to ask their husbands, "Honey, do you love me?" That should not be the case. Our wives should have no doubt that we love them. It should be a self-evident love that is always on display. They should not have to ask, "Do you love me?" My youth pastor that I had when I was in high school, he also was the one who officiated at our wedding. His name was Bob Ramsey. He pastored at Coeur d'Alene Bible Church in Coeur d'Alene. And Bob said to me, after I was married, every time I saw him, he would say this to me. He'd say, "Buster, did you tell Debbie you loved her today?" Every time I saw him, he would say to me, "Buster, did you tell Debbie that you loved her today?" And so I would begin to say, "Hey, Bob, did you tell Sue you loved her today?" He would say to me, "Buster, did you tell Debbie you loved her?" And I'd say, "Bob, did you tell Sue that you loved her today?" See, that should just become a natural part of who we are. I read this past week that biblical love is a decision, not a feeling. But I don't feel in love anymore. Biblical love is a decision, not a feeling. You make the decision to tell somebody that you love them. It is a volitional act rather than an emotional response. It's an act of your will. We choose to love our wives. We choose to love. How did Christ love the church? Sacrificially. He loved the church sacrificially. And you know what? We need to understand that His love for the church is probably the greatest type of love ever written down in the annals of anything in all of humanity. The love of Christ. So what are some practical ways in which men can love their wives? I came up with these. You know, you could come up with your list. But you could give up something for her. Maybe a weekend trip with your friends. Maybe a big item thing that you want to buy. Maybe just some time. Maybe just a walk. You can give up something. You can cherish her. You can make her feel that she's being cherished by you. Make sure she knows that she is the most important thing in your life. Nothing rivals her. Nothing. Not even football. Nothing. You nurture her. You help her to become all that God designed her to become. You nurture her. You bring her along. You encourage her in her avenues of interest. You protect her. She needs to know that you're watching over her. That you're protecting her. Even from people that might be calling and saying, "Hey, you're late for this bill." Men, take that responsibility. Protect your wife in that area. Lead her. Provide the direction that is needed for your relationship to grow. Be the leader in your relationship. Love her. E, encourage her. Encourage her. Far too many marriages start leaning towards criticism of one another. It didn't start that way. As a matter of fact, if your marriage started with criticism, you probably wouldn't have gotten married. If you were being negative and critical about one another, you would have never married that person. Ephesians 4:29 says, "Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that may impart grace to the hearers." I want us to focus in on the second half of that verse. First of all, we're only to use words that are good for necessary edification. It doesn't mean we don't deal with problems. It doesn't mean that we don't talk about issues that come up. But what it means is that we weigh our words very carefully. Do we need to speak that way? Do we need to be harsh? Do we need to be condemning? Do we need to use damaging words? Or do we use words that build the other person up? Secondly, the words that we use ought to impart grace to the hearer. Is anyone guilty in the heat of the moment to say something that you later regret? I've been married for 35 years, and I guarantee you I said a lot of things that have probably hurt my wife. I'm not very proud of that. Words. Grace is defined as unmerited favor. It may be something they don't deserve from us, but we give it anyway. Let me give you an illustration. A wife forgets something that is important to you. You have the option to say something to her that could be hurtful. It doesn't impart grace. But instead you say something like this. Honey, I know that you didn't forget on purpose. And I know that your plate is really full. I'm so sorry that your life is so busy right now. You see, those words express your hurt, but they also build the other person up. They build the other person up. We can either choose to build our mates up, or we can choose to tear them down. I believe the role of the husband, like I said in message number 1, two become one as friends. It's our responsibility to somehow allow our wives to shine. Allow them to shine. Build them up. When Christ, in Ephesians 5, it says that one day He's going to present His church, His bride, it says, as a glorious church. And gentlemen, I don't know, that's how we need to somehow start presenting our brides. They are glorious. Glorious. And the S is servant. You did not marry a slave girl or someone that is to jump at your beck and call, gentlemen. They're not to come, hey, raise your hand like you're in a restaurant, to get the attention of the waiter. I'm over here. You married the king's daughter. You married the king's daughter. She is a princess. Try that on for size. You see, marriage isn't about you being served, but about you serving. Husbands are called to serve their wives. And the term husband literally means to cultivate. Cultivate soil. Cultivate plants. And I can tell you right up front, if you don't spend time in a garden cultivating the soil and preparing the soil, you're not going to get much of a garden. If you don't tend to your plants in that garden, you're not going to get much fruit off of it. I read this past week that husbands, we are responsible for the fruit in our wife's life. One person actually said, if a man doesn't like his wife after 20 years of marriage, the only person that he can blame is himself. The only person he can blame is himself. You made her like she is. Several years ago, I had a man come into my office. They were having marital problems, and he came in for some advice, and he kept telling me all the issues that he was having with his wife, and at the same time he would say, but I love her so much. So I stopped and I asked him, and I said, so tell me, how have you been showing your wife that you love her? That man could not come up with one way in which he had been demonstrating to his wife that he loved her. Love is a verb. It is an action word. It shows itself up when we serve. Jesus said in Mark 10, yet it shall not be so among you, but whoever desires to become great among you shall be your servant, and whoever of you desires to be first shall be slave of all. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give His life a ransom for many. Actions written all over those verses. Actions. Husbands, how are you actually serving your wives? Would you write it down this morning? How are you actually serving your wives? And by the way, I can look around and I know that some of you men are not even taking notes this morning. And one of the ways you can serve your wife is actually to be involved, interacting with the message and actually taking something home with you. So, let's turn to the women now. The roles of the wife. Using roles. Here, accept your roles in this marriage relationship. Respect. Respect. Ephesians 5:33 says, "Nevertheless, let each one of us in so particular so love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband." Every husband in this auditorium this morning needs to feel and to know that his wife respects him. Nothing will build the morale of your husband like knowing that he is being respected. Wives, you have a responsibility, you have a role in your marriage to respect your husbands. Family Life Weekend to Remember teaches that respect is a choice to receive your husband in spite of his weaknesses. And I think that every man in this auditorium would admit to the fact that they have weaknesses. What can a wife do to show her husband respect? Again, the Family Life Weekend to Remember says these are some tools, some ways in which women, wives, can show their husbands respect. An unconditional respect. Don't, just give it to them. Don't make them have to jump through a bunch of hoops. Just give them respect. Honor them, especially before family and friends. Show honor to your husband. Words of affirmation. Show gratefulness for all he does. Does he fix the toilet when it's not working right? Does he unplug the sink or the shower that gets all that hair in it that I talked about in one of my previous messages? What is a husband apt in building a healthy marriage? Then attend a Family Life Weekend to Remember conference. We have, as a church, we have been pushing and encouraging people to go to this conference for over 15 years. Every year we have people that go, but listen, everybody needs that exposure. Talk with Jeff and Carla. Get registered. Invest some money into your marriage. Attend the new adult Sunday school class in here. Go back and rehearse and talk about some of the things that I'm talking about here on Sunday morning, two becoming one. So here's a warning to all husbands. Your first call of duty, and I'm not talking about a video game. Your first call of duty is to your wife. It is not your job. It is not your friends. It is not football. It is not your hobbies. Your first call of duty is to your wife. She takes priority over everything else. She is your role. She is your role. You've got to love what Adam says to Eve when he sees her for the very first time. Look at what he says here. This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of the man. What a difference we would have in our marriages if all of a sudden more husbands would see their wives as a part of themselves. A part of themselves. Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. So men, try it. View your wife as a part of yourself. Believe what Paul taught in Ephesians chapter 5. Believe that. Now, a quick word to wives this morning. Agatha Christie, the English crime novelist, wrote, "An archaeologist is the best husband any woman could have. The older she gets, the more interested he is in her." So a quick word to husbands. Become the archaeologist. Make it your aim to know your wives. 1 Peter 3:7 says, live with your wives in an understanding way. That word understanding means knowledge. We also get the word science from that. Become an archaeologist. Study her. Build a solid relationship with her. Grow old with her. Become more and more interested in her as the two of you are growing older together. Romance your wife. Okay, number 2, or O for Rose, is operations. Operations. The husband is to be the operations director of their home, of their marriage. He is to be the head of the home. The Apostle Paul wrote this in 1 Corinthians 11:3. Go to the next slide if you would, Dave. I don't know if you can see this chart very well. But it says, "But I want you to know that the head of every man is Christ, the head of woman is man, and the head of Christ is God." This is all talking about roles. It's talking about responsibility. It's not talking about rank. It's talking about the responsibility. Who shoulders the responsibility here? And take a look at that chart. The wife submits to the husband submits to Christ, Christ submits to God the Father. It's all about responsibility. God is not asking us to do anything that He Himself is not already doing in the Trinity. He's already doing it. The head houses the brain. And we are called in the marriage to use our brain. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. And yet there are a lot of men that are abdicating their responsibility. A lot of men. You see, the head is the central processing unit. My brain operates my body. Thus, as a husband, we are to use our brain that God has blessed us with in our marriage relationship. Not as a dictator. Not like, hey, I'm the boss here. We're to lead our homes. We're to lead our families. We're to provide some directions. We're to be responsible for where our family is going in life. I want to give you some areas that I think where men are to be the head of. Now, I want to be very careful. I'm not saying that the men are responsible to do all these things, but they're to provide direction in these areas. And I'm thinking of maintenance. Maintenance of the house, maintenance of the cars, maintenance of whatever equipment that you own, that you use around your home or you play on or whatever. That maintenance, you're responsible for providing direction. If it's broken, do I fix it? Do I take it into a shop to get it fixed? Is there somebody in the home that maybe knows how to work on that? Hey, give them that responsibility to work on it. And the other area is finances. Banking, savings, retirement, investment. Husbands, you know what? You're to provide direction. You may not be very good at banking or savings or investing. Maybe your wife is better at that. But you're giving direction in that. And then personnel. Wife, children, family members. You're providing direction for your family on a day in and day out basis. Chores. Outside, inside the home. Direction. Who's going to be responsible for what? And then recreation. Dates, vacations, trips, and so on and so forth. You're giving direction. Again, I'm not saying that the husband is to do all these things. But I'm saying the husband is to provide and to be responsible at providing some direction in these areas. He is to direct. He is to manage his family and his family's affairs. And you know what? When a husband is doing his job, then there's just this kind of harmony that starts to flow in the home. Fulfill your role. L is he's to be loving. Ephesians 5:25. Husbands are called to love their wives in the Bible. Take walks together. Hold each other's hands. Share your secrets. Let him into your heart. Be his greatest cheerleader. I married a cheerleader. And she's my cheerleader. Treasure your man. Treasure him. Like sports. A lot of husbands like sports. So like sports. Play together. Find a hobby. Enjoy something together. Protect your oneness. When you're around other people and red flags begin to pop up about other people, or the two of you can't agree as to whether you want a couple to be a part of your inner circle, then you don't bring them into your inner circle. If there's a red flag, whether from the husband or from the wife, then the two of you agree, no, we don't bring them in. Know your responsibilities. I would encourage you to read Titus chapter 2, verses 4 through 5. Know your responsibilities. Acts of kindness. Be quick to serve your husband. Hey, if he's been out in the sun working on your home or out changing the oil in your car, bring him a glass of iced water or a glass of iced tea. Someone said kindness can be expressed this way. Abundant kindness. Kindness is, maybe you fix your husband toast with his breakfast. Loving kindness is you put some jelly on it. So express some acts of kindness. And by the way, I think this concept comes full circle. As we start doing these things, guess what happens? It starts coming back to us. Prioritize him. He is to be your priority. Just like I said earlier, the wife is to be the priority of her husband. And then render physical affection. Don't make it a chore. Okay. Don't make it a chore. It is for the development of oneness in your marriage. Just a few simple ways to develop oneness. L, loyalty. Loyalty. Proverbs 31:11. There are some women who say, I am so sick of Proverbs 31. I mean, there is no way any woman could ever measure up to being the Proverbs 31 woman. So don't look at all the nuances of Proverbs 31. Let's just focus in on one. Just one. Not all of them, just one. Proverbs 31:11 says, the heart of her husband safely trusts her. That is a biggie in marriage today. Go back and listen to the message last week and you'll understand why. Does your husband know that you're going to be loyal to him? And how is that loyalty spoken? Let me give you some ways. Tell him that you will always be faithful to him. He needs to hear those words of affirmation from you. I will always be faithful to you. Be devoted to him. Give him your full attention. Dress for his eyes only. Dress for his eyes only. Remind him that he has your heart. That he stole your heart. Well, somebody said, I saw on Facebook they were getting married. You stole my heart, so now I'm going to steal your last name. Something like that. Be present. Be present. You are aware that you can be present but not present? You understand that? You can be present but not present. It's not just about being present, it's about showing up. Showing up. Look at these quotes. I thought these were great quotes on loyalty. Having a heart true as steel. William Shakespeare. True to her husband as the dial to the sun. Loyal like a dog. Here's a biblical truth. Woman was taken from man's side. Therefore, be by his side. That's biblical truth. You were taken from his side. Be by his side. E is esteem. Philippians 2, 3, and 4. These are the words from the Apostle Paul. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem other better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interest, but also the interest of others. Men need the respect of their wife to have esteem. And a wife can respect and build esteem into her husband. And these are some practical ways again. Let me tell you how. Through show and tell. Again, acts of kindness. And speaking words of affirmation. Remind your husband of his value to you. And I'm not talking about his bank account. Or what he has in his retirement. Or the investments that he has. Or his portfolio. I'm talking about his value as a person to you. Have a strong opinion of him. A strong opinion of your husband. When making a judgment call about your husband, make it a good judgment call. Do you know, a wife may clean her microwave oven and get it all nice and clean, and the husband comes along and puts something in it, cooks it too long, and it splatters all over. You think he did that intentionally? I'm going to go there, and I know my wife just cleaned the microwave, and I'm going to put something in there that's going to splatter all over, so she just has to do it again. No, he didn't do it intentionally. So when you make a judgment call, make it a good one. Think the best of him and tell him what you're thinking. Build your husband's esteem. And get this. When your husband has an aha moment about you as a woman, when he's finally figured out something about you, praise him. Tell him, that's what I like. You figured me out. You understand me. Praise him. And then the S, submission. In Ephesians 5:22 it says, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. And over in Colossians 3:18 it says, wives, submit to your own husbands as fitting to the Lord. Not talking about dictatorship. When the Bible uses the word submission, it's using a word, if properly understood, actually sets marriages free. When properly understood. That word submit means to be subordinate. It means to come under the authority of another person. Patrick Morley, in his book, The Man in the Mirror, says the wife's duty is to submit to you, which is the ultimate expression of respect. Why does it seem that everything for a man goes back to the need for respect? Because that's what he needs. He needs to be respected by his wife. When a husband loves his wife, and a wife is submitting to her husband, it does away with control issues. It does away with who's going to be boss in this marriage. And someone had said, no man should ever think that his wife should submit to him if he's not first loving her. A woman needs love, a man needs respect, and when neither of them are